All right. We are here in the 5th edition of the MLB Pro 2021 previews. Third one today. Met with Cole Seltzer earlier today. So Cole's friend Matt, appreciate you joining us today, man, to talk about Astros baseball.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with 2020, right? I think if you look at the league as a whole, as some of the surprising teams, I think the Astros are one of my surprises in a negative way. I thought y'all would be more competitive than you are. Is this where you thought the team would be, or do you have different expectations?
I think if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I think we're shooting probably for the 86 or so range of wins. I would have been pretty content with where we were at. I think after last year, one game away from a, play-in game 163, I think the expectations were that we would get a little bit better this year. So it's been a disappointment to that extent. But I think from the beginning of the rebuild, this is, I think, year 5 or 6 for me. The expectation was 2021. So this is still fallen into our timeline, and it's been good, kind of actually using this year as, all right, maybe we got to reevaluate a little bit and find upgrades at certain positions or in the rotation, whatever it might be, for next year when we truly think we're ready for this.
Yeah. So still on pace with what you originally thought. Those little glimpses you get, they can break your heart sometimes where you think you're ahead of time.
I think last year we outperformed every expectation by a ton, and I think that definitely changed expectations for this year, maybe for the worse.
Yeah, I think that you actually did the right thing looking back on it, not maybe rushing and dealing some young pieces to try to win this year when you were still on pace. That's an impressive restraint. Looking at the line up and down, where do you think the biggest – I don't call them a disappointment because they're all kids, right? But, is it Ron Winterholder not being able to break 220 as a batting average? Where's the disappointment this year, and what do you expect to improve in 2021?
Yeah, so the biggest thing at the beginning of the season was Richard Fowler. This guy has been, our – we know what to expect for the first couple of years. And this year, the first, couple months of the season, he was looking like a AAA player, to be frank. And we decided we'd actually take him and put him back into the 3-hole. And I remember doing this last year, and he just exceeded all expectations and started slugging. I'm like, you know what? We're going to see if it happens again. It's going to take a hell of a run to catch up with the Angels and the Mariners. So let's try it. And he's gotten himself back, well above, what we expected he'd get to. So that's been a nice little turnaround. But yeah, I think Winterhalter was a guy we dealt the number 2 overall pick, which turned into Ronald Acuna. Now, I don't think we would have even considered Acuna at that spot if we ended up using the draft pick. I think we had other guys on our board, so I don't want to think that way. But it was the number 2 pick, which was Acuna, for Winterhalter. So we had huge expectations for him, and we still think he can be one of the better catchers in the league. But I think, looking at this a couple years ago when we made the trade and after last season, our expectation is this is a top 3 or 5 catcher in the league. And I think now it's he's probably 8 to 12, where it's he's still a better catcher. He's an everyday starter, but you're not getting the same offensive production that we were expecting, which, that definitely changes our plans a little bit. Thankfully, we've got, a deep catching system and have Joey Bart potentially on the way as soon as next year. But, Winterhalter is definitely the starter still right now, but on much thinner ice.
Yeah, that's nice to have. It's nice to have that depth. I agree with you. I still think he's going to be a very special player behind the dish. I think he's going to be good. His strikeouts are a hell of a lot higher than I thought they'd be. But again, he's 24. It's a tough position. It takes some transition. Looking at your team makes me angry sometimes. Because I think about a guy like Aaron White, who you and I probably had, 50 conversations about in your 5 years you've been in this league. Almost a 4 WAR, hitting just like I thought he would when he came up. So there's some really good players on this team that I know you and I have discussed.
And other guys that I've gotten from you. My ace for this season, at least in my opinion, in Diwali, is from you.
Yeah. Kong is from
Will Rainey is from you.
Yeah.
Darsh Kawawi is from you. But that that's the nature. Is there was some big trades between me and you a couple of years ago when we were flip-flopped. You're much more in the rebuild now, and I'm kind of coming out of it. Back then I'm going deep into the rebuild, and you were kind of trying to make those final pieces at the run. But
yeah, you can probably say that about most teams, and most teams in this league are filled with my former players. But let's look at 2021 for the Astros. The rotation, as it is now, I assume Davia's coming back, right? He's going to be your guy. You have to assume Dave Groves is going to be around for the long haul. Tim James, Will Rainey. What about Fung? You've been dangling him out there for a while. Who is not in this rotation in 2021, and where do you find their replacement?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is I think next year Josh Norby, I don't know, I think he's going to be Norby. I like that better. Who we got from Arizona this last offseason. He made 2 starts, both against Seattle this year. One was very good, and one was a little lackluster, 4 2/3, 4 earned. We definitely see him as a part of the rotation next year. And in our eyes, it's going to be Davia and Norb are 1 and 2. We love Will Rainey. We just think that if he's, lined up against the 3 starter, we've got a really good chance in those games. And we think Davia and Norby are going to be, consistently able to keep us in the games against the 1s and 2s around the league. After that, I think James is the most likely to stay. Groves is a guy that, our internal rankings have him pretty high, but, just hasn't ever – when he's starting, my stomach's a little bit tighter in knots of like, shit, today might be a day that we lose. And he's been pitching much better this year than I expected. But I think, we've got the ability to have him, Fung and Melvin Garner, who's a guy with, loads of potential and had a fantastic season last year, are all guys that I think we're going to have, dangling this offseason. The nice thing is that Groves is – under contract forever, but he's also a guy that in theory we could release any day. So there's not as much of a tie to him. Whereas a guy like Garner still has a little bit of a contract. And, I don't want to, as such, still a pretty small market team, cutting a guy with 3 years and $4.8 million due to him is a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
We still feel really high on Fung. He's, I believe, our all-star representative last year. And, he's had a really, big struggle this season. But we don't think that that's the pitcher that he is. He dealt with a little bit of an injury. I believe it was a back throughout the year. We think that, he's a guy that should be able to come back and be a solid back into the rotation kind of guy for us. But, I think he will be talked about in the offseason. I think that there's teams that have started to see the success that having a long reliever who can come in and start, or even just be a guy who comes in after a opener, can have a lot of success. And I think, we might be able to find a trade that fits both my needs and some other team by giving them Fung as well as additional pieces.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting pieces to kind of break down there. Fung is such a weird story this year because I think you're right. His ratings and his history say he should be performing way better than he is. He just got shelled. Mm-hmm. So you hope an offseason and a good spring for him can bring him back. And if he's your 5 and swing guy, I mean, that's such a great weapon to have. The other piece is that I'm looking up and down your AAA kind of top prospects list here, and you've got guys like Jose Ramos, Edwin Cabrera, Jason Groom, who can come up and be relief pitchers. And there's something to be said, I think, in this league to having middle relief, high leverage guys have been good starting pitching prospects in your minor league system that just couldn't quite make it as a long inning, 6-7 inning guy. I think there's a real piece to that. And you've got a lot of guys that I like a lot.
Yeah, so that was kind of the plan with Ramos, from when we first got him a couple years ago from Seattle, was we'd love if he can start. He's got multiple pitches, tons of stamina, great ground ball ratings. But we also look at him and he's a lefty, again, throwing 99 and, a extreme ground ball guy. If we can have him out there as a middle reliever, that might be a guy that's able to take, okay, now we don't expect, Garner or Fung or Groves to go 6 or 7.
Yep.
We want 4, maybe 5. Give it to Ramos for a couple innings and turn it over to the back end of the bullpen that, Marty Vaughn hasn't been what we thought he'd be this year, but what we believe to be a really good, 8-9 inning guys in Vaughn and Chaco.
Yeah, I love it. We got a little bit out of order here. I apologize. So let's back up before we get into the 2020 rotation. Let's talk about overall expectations of the team, right? 2021, You think you're going to finish around 86 this year. Where are you looking in 2021, and where does that put you in the stack rankings of the AOS? That is the nightmare that is out there.
So I think present alignment, we're shooting for 88, 89. Maybe we can touch 90 wins. Because, I do want to – there's deals that I want to pursue this offseason, but I've also got a pretty good idea as to what I'm willing to pay. And I don't know if those are deals that are going to be able to get done this offseason.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty happy with what we've got as far as our farm system. You said we got a couple guys who are ready in AAA, but we've got a good number of pieces that I think can be major league ready within the next year or two. And we're not really losing any major pieces in the next 2 years. And we're going to have the money to be able to resign, Jagon when he does hit free agency. So we're not ready to, move on from anything. So I think presently constructed, we're shooting 88, 89 wins. I think if we can get a couple of the trades that we have envisioned, we're looking at maybe 92, 93. I do think it's going to be difficult to, no matter what, I'm in a division where the last place team right now has 5 aces.
Yeah.
At least in the last, maybe they're not aces anymore, but they were aces within the last 2 seasons. And it's not like they fell off a cliff. And Texas has consistently been the number 3 team that's just outside of the playoffs each year. And then you've got quite literally the 2 best teams in the league from the last, 6-7 years.
Yep.
And they're not really losing anyone. So I think to expect that we're all of a sudden going to jump into second or more is just a little bit outlandish. I think that we got to shoot, hey, we're going to get second wild card and, piecemeal a game together that can beat one of these 2 teams. Because, I don't see there being any way that, LA and Seattle don't make the playoffs next year without, pulling a full Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be, you're shooting for a wild card in their home stadium. And, I think that's going to be the goal if we're able to get a couple pieces in. And if not, it's going to be one of those things where we reassess maybe early in the season if we're not seeing production out of a couple of our guys. And, we move at least some of the prospect capital that we've slowly built up. Because at least for me right now, some of the guys that I really love aren't our top-rated guys and are further down in the minors that we think over the next few years are going to develop, grow their potential a little bit. And so I think we're able to move from the top of our system some of our best guys and not hurt our prospects' value.
The AL West has to be you just projected 92 to 93 wins. You're like, yeah, maybe that gets us third place. That's got to be such a frustrating experience.
Yeah, I think the most frustrating part is like last year I think I held the wild card going into the last 2 weeks of the season, and Texas was like 3 or 4 games out. I could be remembering it wrong, but I know I was ahead a little bit. And like I'm looking at their team and I'm like, they moved a couple of pieces. Like I don't see it really happening. They're just a team that year in and year out is like built just well enough to put them 1 or 2 games out of the playoffs. And obviously last year, beat me to it. But it's even like it's all of them. And I think, the moves that were made in Oakland, before to get Bueller and to get Giolito are going to go a long way because that rotation has only been added to. So you're not even looking at, a simple – there's no series that you're walking into and you're like, oh, I've got a good chance.
No, there's nothing. And Scott doesn't know what the word rebuild means. He's all in all the time. So
exactly.
Oakland's coming from the top. Texas, Arlington's just a tough place to play. I think it's one of those teams that they can match with anybody. So you go down there, you better score 30, 40 runs or you're going to walk out with wins. So, okay, good. That's an interesting look at 2021. We've already talked about your rotation. Let's talk about the lineup, right? We already talked about Winterholder being on thin ice with Joey Bart, depending on how that looks. The rest of the lineup looks like it's set to me. Unless you go out and make a move in the offseason, what am I missing? Is there somebody I'm not seeing a potential replacement for?
Yeah, so, I think when you go through our lineup, it's our 1, 2, and 3 is all outfielders right now. They're all studs defensively, which is something that, we've definitely, looked for with our team. But they're all, producing extraordinarily well offensively right now. So I don't see any reason to shake things up there. I'm also really happy with the backup outfielders that we've got. We were able, with the 28-man expansion, to call up Mike Palmer, who's a guy that is just, 50s across the board and stellar defense and stellar base running. And so we're pretty content there. I think one thing that is going to be interesting is we have the $26 million extension on Jose Abreu. I don't think we have any plans to move him, but I think he's a guy that, if we could find a way to put him together with a prospect or two and maybe get a younger first baseman in there, it's something we're going to at least entertain this offseason and be able to use that money elsewhere. Right now we're projecting for $26.5 million available. If we were able to move him and have 50 available, it allows us to expand on the types of players we're looking to bring in. We're entertaining that. And then Bill Law is, he's hit incredibly well this year and he's a great defender, but he's, again, a guy that we're willing to discuss it at the very least. We had a lot of discussions with Colorado this year around him. Ultimately couldn't get anything that came to fruition, but he's a guy that, maybe we're able to move him and put Tatis at third. And then, we believe Gary Hardy, who got his call up to AAA about a month ago, is a guy who can come up and hit really well at the big league level. And we've got our, guy Jorge Martinez as a stud defensive replacement. So I don't see anything really changing. We're pretty content there, but I think I'm going to be much more open to some major moves this offseason than any offseason before.
Yeah, I think I was looking up and down your lineup trying to find a place. I mean, there's a guy I like Abreu. I kind of forgot you brought him in, right? As a veteran, he is expensive. Mm-hmm. I think if he goes, I've always liked Keiko, however the hell you say that name. He's not your stud defender at first, but he's a great bat. Looks like he's been DHing for you all season.
So he was a guy, he wasn't quite putting it together, and we had the ability to go out and get, Abreu. And honestly, and Jim can attest to this, the deal that we were trying to go after was to bring in Liberatore and Abreu and send, a pretty major haul. It got a little bit of traction before Josh ended up shutting it down and saying, look, Liberatore's not moving. But, that started the ball rolling. And then we were like, look, Abreu is maybe a guy who can come in and add to our lineup. We weren't hitting tremendously well this year. So our hope was to just, hopefully boost our second half hitting and find a ride into the playoffs. But we had a tough stretch of, I think it was 10 or 11 straight against Seattle and LA that we didn't perform up to par. So that kind of shut down our season. But it was kind of just Keiko, or however you end up pronouncing it. He just wasn't producing the way that we thought he could. And, we felt a 2-year buy of Jose Abreu maybe gives him a, chance to better define his role and then come back, in a couple of years. We either go with him or, go out and find a replacement. But he is a guy, again, I think I've discussed flipping him in trades for first basemen before, and I think he's going to continue to be in that conversation. But the thing that I actually really like is when he got sent down to AAA, he was playing left field and showed he could hold his own a little bit out there. So I think that is definitely going to add to his value if I, end up moving him.
Yeah, he's got a cannon of an arm. I mean, it won't gun somebody out like, maybe from deep in the field, but he's enough that he's not going to embarrass himself out there. You got a good center fielder we should do. And Kawaii can cover most of that ground. He's not going to kill you in the outfield. All right, so that's interesting. So it sounds like the Astros they'll be out there. You'll be out there looking, maybe not trying to track somebody down, but you'll be listening and maybe pursuing some deals should they come up. And this is MLB Pro, so of course they will come up.
Exactly.
Kaiser's always one bad day away from flipping his whole team, apparently. So we'll see how that goes down. Let's talk about end of the season awards, right? Rookie of the Year for the 2021 Astros. Who does that go to?
So sadly, it will not go to Tatis. He's going to be past rookie eligibility.
That'd been an easy
Kind of
one.
hurts. A couple years ago, I was able to keep Arredondo due to an injury and keep him under the threshold, and he then struggled mightily the next season, but was hoping to bring some hardware in. I think Norby has a really good chance. Again, we think he's a top-level starter. We've been really impressed with what we saw from him in AAA. I think if not him, the only other option is potentially Joey Bart. I think, we're going to see there's definitely a consideration of sending him to Arizona Fall League, take a good look at what the other talent being sent is. But potentially try and get him a couple extra games, give him a full look in spring training. There's a chance that he breaks camp with the team, and if he does, I think he'll have a good shot at it. If he's breaking with the team, it's going to be to be the starter over Winterhalter.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's going to be tough for a rookie to come in and crack our rotation or crack our, lineup. So I don't know who else would potentially fall in. Maybe a guy like Justin Ellis as a super utility. But right now, like I said, we're pretty happy with what we've got as a backup infielder and, really happy with what we've got as a backup outfield. So not sure if he makes the team either.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. With the younger teams, it's tougher to find where that Rookie of the Year slots in. Who is your Cy Young?
I think it's got to be Davia. He hasn't performed exactly what we thought this year, but again, it is his rookie year. He came up midseason. We think, he is our guy. If we somehow limped into a, wild card spot this year, he was going to be the one who's getting the ball in, game one. Now he's going to get the ball, and every other starter is going to be pitching in relief as well. But, he's what we think is our guy. So I think it's got to go to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think he's an easy choice. You got some talented kids there too, but I think he's your guy. And then last piece would be the MVP. Who is the MVP? Let's say you give me a J-Gon and a non-J-Gon answer to this.
Yeah, the easy answer is it's J-Gon. He's not going to get MVP in the entire league, I don't think, especially just not being a playoff team. But I think if you're not looking at him, it's going to be weird, but I'm going to say it's going to be either Fowler or Bill Law. I think if Bill Law, manages to stay with our team, it means we didn't find a significant upgrade, which, I don't know how many there are. I know Taylor Sparks is a guy that we had kind of looked at. We never really talked about him when he was with Oakland, but, there's not many guys that we feel are that much better than Law, and, he's one of the few that we kind of saw as tradable that, we obviously weren't able to come to a deal. And, I'm assuming you're not moving him. I say that now, and in a month and a half, he's going to be on the trade block.
We'll see.
But I think Bill Law is a guy, we have really high expectations. It's why we haven't moved him yet. But if he's with the team, it's because we feel confident in him. And I think Fowler has really solidified himself after, a month and a half of some struggling. And we think that his defense, coupled with his, resurgence on the offensive side of the ball, we think he's a guy that's going to be huge for our team. I think Tatis and Aaron White are going to continue to do what they've done every year. I think Arredondo he's a tough one because he does have the strikeout numbers. The average has been dipping, but the home runs are tremendous year in and year out. I just don't know if he's going to, become that same hitter that he was the first 20 games that we had him as a rookie the first year. So I don't see if he has the output to become our team MVP next year. Yeah.
I think Aaron White, Fernando Tatis Jr. might be my favorite middle infield combination of anybody in the league right now. I'm trying to think of somebody I like better. I don't think I can think of a duo I'm more excited about offensively. I know White's had his struggles defensively from time to time, but I like both of them in the field as well.
And White's a guy we've been using, and I don't even know how much it's been, but we do have him set that he gets defensive subbed over to first base.
Yeah.
So, he's got 36 games at first base where he's, much better. But he's, not necessarily the greatest second baseman in the world, and we originally got him as a shortstop, but the dude he flat out hits, and even that, I don't think he's near his potential hitting yet. So,
no, I see him as a potential 25 to 30 home run second baseman. That's not going to kill you in the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more than a suitable trade-off in the American League. I think he'll take it.
The one thing I'd say is I'd definitely take him over Brian and Noah.
Yeah, fuck you, Mitch. All right, last thing. We're done with the 2021 Astros, right? Next year is going to be okay for you guys. You're going to try and sneak in a wild card spot. Who wins the 2020 World Series? Are you staying at home in the AL West, or is somebody going to make a surprise appearance and take this thing down?
See, I'm either going Seattle or simply because I made the trade with him earlier this year. I do think the World Series is going to be Seattle versus Arizona. That's
Okay.
for sure. I'm pretty set on that. I know that St. Louis is certain that either Arizona or the Mets will not make it. I'm pretty confident that Arizona is going to, and I'm really looking forward to it if he does. I think Seattle takes it, but I don't think it's as much of a AL heavy favorite as it's been in the past couple of years.
I'd like to agree with you. That is the second Mariners vote I've gotten. First mention of the Diamondbacks, actually. I worry if it's not the Mets, I don't think anybody in the National League can compete with Seattle specifically. If Seattle gets knocked off, I think the Diamondbacks can compete with anybody out there. But I think if it's Seattle, it's got to be the Mets just because their pitching matches up better.
I think the one thing that's going to be really interesting is if it is Seattle versus Arizona, is Arizona's got some guys. I mean, I think he had an injury a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about some relievers who might see some additional time in the rotation. He's got relievers with a lot of stamina.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a series where obviously, he's probably not pitching 6 starters, which is what he has set up now. He's, maybe narrows it down to 4. And all of a sudden he's got a, back into the bullpen where he's got multiple guys who can go 3 innings. And I think this team, I think they match up. I mean, it's number 1 run scored for Arizona, and Seattle is number 4. I think they match up pretty well offensively. They match up decently pitching wise. I think if this is a series where you get 2-3 extra inning games, which I think it's close enough to, I think Arizona is able to prevail simply on the depth of their bullpen.
I mean, they're very good in the bullpen. You're right. They've been – that was like a main focus for them. I guess I dealt Matt Manning over there for a very good young prospect. I think he was very willing to deal with these younger pieces and get somebody like this. I was trying to find Shohei Ohtani because I couldn't find him anywhere. I wonder if they get to the World Series, is a guy like Ohtani that you can throw in a home park in Arizona and essentially have not a full American League roster while the American League have to lose their DH. What does that do for this team?
I was going to say, because Arizona obviously will not have home field advantage. So right now, Ohtani is their number 2 starter. I don't know if this is messed up at all, but he's listed as number 2. He's got the lowest ERA of the bunch. So I'm going to say he's the number 1, number 2, whatever it might be. You'd want him to throw the second game, and, that potentially gets him to throw game 6, game 7, whatever it is. I think you almost have to use him in game 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe on short rest in game 7, simply because the disadvantage that Seattle gets from having a guy who's, I'm looking for my scout right now, 70, 65, 70, 55, 50, and you can bat him 3rd as the starting pitcher.
Yeah.
You change the entire game. So, I think it's going to be really close if that's this, matchup. And, I know the Mets are absolutely killing it this year. I think the Radotz injury is just going to be too significant to overcome, especially when we get to the playoffs. I'd love to see them do it because they have been, the team in terms of, not necessarily the best team in the NL for the last couple of years, but just the way that he's been able to do it is, I think I had looked at it a couple of years ago, and it's, a minimum number of trades that have been made. It's just, trusting the farm system, a couple pieces picked up here and there in free agency, and it's an entirely different way to play OOTP and especially in MLB Pro. And to be able to see that work is, it's just like I'd love to see the White Sox make the playoffs. I think they're in the hunt and have the position
They're
locked down.
making it. They're leading by a couple games. I think they're
Yeah, so he's got 4 games over the Indians. Indians are the second wild card, who have a half game on the Rangers and 4 on the Yankees. So they're 4.5 up on a spot with, 16 to play?
Yeah.
So they should be making it. And, whether they get knocked out on the first round or not, again, you're now looking at the Mets, who did it one way of free agents and no trades, to the White Sox, who have traded literally everyone for
twice.
years.
Twice at least.
Yeah, exactly. And even mid-season, I think the trade with the Reds, kind of drew some question marks. Was they weren't off to the hottest start, and he said, look, we're flipping, some of our better players and bringing in obviously established starters, but not necessarily superstars, at least in my mind. And those guys have, really come to life and started to, destroy for them. Yeah. And really, solidified them as a playoff contender. So I think it'll be really interesting, especially, I don't know if there's any way it happens, but a White Sox-Mets World Series would be a crazy dichotomy of the two ways to play MLB Pro. Yeah.
You think you can say that the White Sox Diamondbacks do the same thing. Diamondbacks have basically done exactly that outside their bullpen. They have built totally from the inside. So
yeah, I think I was just joining the league when he was, I remember who's the pitcher? Dan Herron. I think I was here for Dan Herron's last 2 years, but I think at that point he had already gone full rebuild and wasn't necessarily making those trades where he had no assets left.
Yeah.
So at that point he was, truly in league office, a tank. But, he's done it. I mean, you see the lineup is what? 2 number 1 overall picks?
Mm-hmm. At least. I know Vlad
and Jeremy Scott.
Yeah, that's the one. And Scott Clark, I think, was the number 1 pick as well, one of their pitchers.
Scott Clark was 10th overall. Yeah, first round. Yeah, I mean, it's their whole lineup is what? First rounders, maybe a second rounder.
Yeah.
Or, a guy like Daz Cameron, who they got from Seattle, I believe was a first rounder. Oh, no, a minor league contract for $10 million. So, same thing.
Yeah. And then Shohei, which is always one of the greatest. I think he'll be one of the fun stories. We probably got to end this thing here, but Shohei Ohtani, with his struggles he had the first 2 years, and he wanted to trade him, but couldn't because no trade clause he gave him. And to see him producing the way he's producing right now is awesome. So I hope he comes up big in the National League. Matt,
exactly.
My daughter is begging for me to come inside and put her to bed, so I am going to let
Sounds
you.
Sounds good.
Appreciate the time, man. I'll get this thing up, and best of luck the rest of the year and in 2021 to the Houston Astros.
You as well. Hope all your trades go well.
Thanks, bud.
See ya.